The 2024 edition of the UGoveRN International Event featured an exciting excursion to explore the process and impact of densification in Amsterdam. Our members journeyed from Amsterdam South to Amsterdam North, visiting key sites that highlight this transformative process and observing the dynamic changes shaping the city. So this is actually we are in the middle of the financial heart of Amsterdam, Randstad, and perhaps the Netherlands as well. This was created by urban planning, but however, it's developed through time, reflecting on expectations of the economy. One of the very interesting parts of this story is that mid-1990s, coming to 2008-9 economic crisis, they had lots of headquarters established, but then when the investments stopped, the local government decided that they would go for a new plan to include housing in the area, because it was all office space and some little retail, but of course it was a dead investment. So they start investing or enabling housing investments here. We are going to see a couple of them today. And why we are here today is that's also part of this densification plan of the city, and they make some plans to enable densified developments. We are going to stop in a minute, including these new housing development projects. So it's a very exciting area. I used to take here students to show that the public space, the way they design public space, is very interesting here. There are some first generation, very passive green spaces like this one. Some of them are public-private spaces, and they also, through time, change their character, as we are going to talk in the case of here. So maybe I should just stop here to this little introduction, so that we start walking to the first point, where we are going to have Alicia introducing us this housing densification plan, which was developed much later in the early 2000s in the process.
So we are here in the middle of what is called the Kenniskwartier development. So just over there is, on the other side of this sport field, is the Vrije Universiteit. That's Kenniskwartier Zuid. In the middle here is Kenniskwartier Midden, and this is Kenniskwartier Noord. So what we're here to look at is kind of to ground this excursion in some of Tuna's theories and in fragmented governance regimes and how they're created through hybrid contractual landscapes. So we're really here to see is how these fields, which are these three sites, which are all going to be developed and are currently being developed, as we can see, show evidence of this happening as a part of the overall densification process. As Tuna mentioned, Zuid has interpreted it very literally. So, how does this fit together? Site we're going to focus on. These two sites down here, we're not going to really talk about as much. It is important to know that this middle one, there's going to be, ostensibly in the next 10 years, over 2,000 units, homes built. Between those trees and to that building over there. So we don't know much about it at all yet. There's no public or very little public information available. And the reason that's true is because they haven't necessarily started the process. They're going to redo a building in the south part, which is going to become, it's now the math and physics building. It's going to become the sports complex. And so once that's done, then they're going to get rid of these sports fields. So that I think they're just thinking we have plenty of time. There's two main projects that are obviously been built or are being built. So over here, this tall building where you see the paintings that are on the side of the people, this is called the Step Zone. This is a social housing complex. It's 200 units. So it's built by a social housing corporation, fully completed, and was the first part of the project. The building behind us is called the Pulse. It has these two towers, with the middle part being the connecting unit. It's full of offices. Sorry? It's like a pulse, exactly. It's full of, it has offices, it has housing units, and it has quote unquote cultural amenities. So they're putting a movie theater in there. They want it to be part of this hub. Distinctly, there are 150 units that are middle rental market housing, and then 50 units, or 49 units, I think, that are private sector rental, which implies luxury rental. Now, the reason, part of what Tuna mentioned again in the densification plan is the densification plan is intended to combat the housing crisis that Amsterdam is facing. And Amsterdam claims we don't have enough units. So the provision of houses that are social, that are middle income, and that are luxury is quite a concern for the city. And the two parts, again, are the social housing provision and the middle income housing provision. And the city has plans to hit 40-40-20. That's the proportion of units from social, middle income, and luxury. So what we'll see, and what we do know, is that the plans from the city, in terms of they have this whole map of all of the places that are going to be densified. This is the gemeente, has this map. It has lists of how many units are going to be built in each place, and it's specific numbers. It's not just like approximately 1,000. It's down to 71 or whatever it is. And there are two things here. One, the middle income apartments does not match the 40-40-20, right? There are enough social housing being built. There's a lot, maybe not enough, but there is a lot. And then there are of course luxury houses being built, but middle, it's just, they aren't, in their numbers, are not hitting 40-40-20. Sometimes they say they are they fudge it a little bit, but it's not. And so the fact that there's middle income housing here is important. But as we know from Tuna, this is all individual contracts with different developers. And so how long the apartments need to stay regulated as middle income, we don't know. And not only that, the idea that it's built in Zoudas, which, as Tuna mentioned, is the international business hub, but now also is trying to make itself into the innovation hub. The reason it's called Kenniskwartier, knowledge quarter, is because of the university, but they also want it to be shipped as this form of incubator and technology base. So the offices that are there, what are they going to be filled with, and how is that going to affect not only the price for the private sector rental, but once those contracts are up for the middle sector rentals to be no longer regulated in the same way, what's going to happen? There's two developers here. They speak a big game about sustainability and urban green. And the important point to note, which I mentioned to Jonathan earlier, is that we can see those trees on the top of the building. They are building a sustainable urban biotope, which is literally a forest on top of the middle part of the building. And they have all of these things about how it's nature inclusive, this development, and how it's providing space for the ecosystem and the habitat for animals and things like this. And they're building trees starting 35 meters in the air, and this is going to be the new solution for the future city. As a part of the development, the shape of the pulse with the other buildings has to create, according to the gemeente, or actually I think it's the Zoudas municipality, has to create a U shape so that there's a courtyard in the middle. So it creates a U shape that way, but it also is supposed to create a U shape that comes around here, that creates a U in the middle there, and there's going to be two more developments here that create a U shape on this side. And those courtyards are allegedly going to be connected. They're going to be publicly accessible. There's going to be a canal in the middle. I don't know where. All here, right? Or some kind of dividing thing. They claimed it was a canal. It's not clear whether. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So there's all of these things about. They're very concerned about how green space and nature is going to be maintained in the provision of this development. And at the same time, we can see that this is completely, it's not connected to anything else that's happening here. It's its own development that's separate from everything else.
Maybe if I may add something, you can keep it on. Of course, you can see that this is all part of this very adaptive planning approach. I mean, they know at the same time saying the U shape should be there. Huh? There are all these demands and structures and so on, numbers of units, not 70 but 71 units or whatever, very precise, but at the same time leaving it open to opportunities.
So, okay, so we're standing right now in front of the Circle. This was the sustainability showpiece, it's a quote, of the bank, which is right behind us, the tall building right behind us. The bank was, I believe, finished, okay, I'm gonna say 1994, I don't think it was 1994, but that's a date that was written down somewhere. And then it took them about 20 to 30 years to build this. Whether this was promised as a part of their lease, we don't know, some sustainability thing, but basically this was them showing that they care about the community and they care about the environment. The insulation for this little building had the pairs, I think it was 16,000 pairs of jeans from the bank's employees to make the insulation for the building. There was a rooftop garden that was publicly accessible and was supposed to teach people in the neighborhood about plants indigenous to the Netherlands, about gardening, I guess. I'm not really sure what was going to teach people in the neighborhood. And then in 2021, ABN AMRO decided to leave. And so they decided to sell the rights to the lease to someone. It took them about 2 years, and it was bought by the Victory Development Group, which is a big international developer. And so the bank actually moved to a neighborhood, Zuidoost, a neighborhood that's not too far away. Of course, that meant a few things. First of all, this building was sat empty for 2 years. There was a restaurant over there in the building that was like, you know, sustainable fine dining, whatever. And then there was a community space. It was unused. I think the restaurant might have still been running.
Very expensive.
But it was very expensive too. And of course the garden, the rooftop garden, was unmaintained. There was trash. The plants would be dead. Some were fine because they're plants, but you know, it was completely disarray. And then Victory Group decided to buy it, and of course they're going to redevelop this site. And it's not clear what's going to happen yet. On their website, they make, you know, crazy statements about how you know, it's going to be the sustainable future cities for the future, and they're leading the envisioning this future city and leading the way and all of these things. Of course, how dismantling a building contributes, or they had some statement about how they're saving carbon emissions because of this building by dismantling it as opposed to just leaving it there and using it still. The use of the lease, they built it 20 years after the main building was already completed, so what took them so long to do it? You know, they're dismantling the materials and preparing the materials for reuse. Essentially, that means they're actually going to ship this building to the new location and somehow going to put this there. So we are on the terrace of the valley. Because we're here, we know that it is publicly accessible green space. Don't you feel green? And so this was developed by OVG Real Estate and owned by the RGB Group, but I think also the Edge was involved in it. And it was finished in 2021. It's mixed facilities. So Tuna wants to talk about Sapiens, which is the space downstairs, but we're going to get to that as we're walking. And then also there are offices, as we can literally see over there, the people working in there. It's not clear whether they're co-working or if there are leases. And then the rest, as in the 3 towers that we see, are all luxury apartments, 196 units. The developers made massive claims about the sustainability of this building and how, and actually, if you want to take out your phones now, I suggest you do, and just type in the valley I think it's .Amsterdam. They start with this aerial shot of the building in an alpine forest. With mountains in the background. You know, this is definitely having some sustainable imaginaries. But the reason we're here is partially to look at this and to look at this fragmented governance regime, because the hybrid contractual landscape regime, because this is a part of the Revel development. The fields we see over there, not the sport fields, the ones to the right, are also the Ravel development. So this building and Swoops Around was all technically under one plan. On those fields that we see, there will be built 1,350 homes according to the Saudas municipal website. Of course, the gemeente website has a different number. They say there's going to be more than 1,500 units. And then, but I think most of what we're seeing here is two things. One, they actually are ostensibly creating green space. What happens if they actually do, we'll see. But it's also to reinforce the canal, because part of the deal was they were going to maintain the waterway as a part of the construction process. Like there was a deal that they had to make sure that the construction in making this land buildable would actually maintain the waterway and the canal, and then also plant and fish and bird life along the canal. One other comment. This will be ostensibly a car-free zone with only green space between the buildings.
Different place, very different place as well. So we took this north-south line, which is developed recently and completed in 2018, aiming at connecting the northern part of Amsterdam to the south, basically to create new living spaces. We are, as you can see, in a very different environment than the south. Here there is no financial industry, there is no pushing of the market. Here what we have is the capacity of land to develop new housing. And this is how the municipality and the development industry sees this area. This is the new only housing development area of the city, where we can densify big time.
So here around the station, there, as you can see, they're building a lot of high-rise buildings. And one of the sort of main ways densification is occurring in the city is to densify these areas around the key transport hubs, pointing to the fact that the city is really taking more note of the role that this neighborhood plays in relation to the broader region, and also sort of economically to make it a place where people can, funnel through for living and working. And so to that end, they're amending their skyrise policy from 2011, determining places that it's appropriate to place skyrise buildings, but also including some new stipulations about how high-rise buildings relate to public space. For instance, there's a rule that buildings above a certain height needs to fulfill some kind of social function for the neighborhood. So that's an interesting sort of governance mechanism of how to translate value that is created within these property-driven contexts. I'm just going to talk about the main square, and we can look at it when we walk through. But here on the other side of these buildings, it's the main square of what is set to be sort of the new heart of Borgslattermeerplein. And I can say from experience the quality of the square has improved quite a lot. And you can see that they're really focusing on improving greenery, improving connections, and improving the vibe of the neighborhood, which used to score quite low on social and safety indexes. But you can see it's a work in progress, and by walking from this new development we just saw across here, we're really taking a journey like back in time, because we see the sign of Old Nord or Old Borgslattermeerham at the Boventi Mall, which we're going to stop in, and we'll stop indoors.
So can I just, we want to walk, but
yeah,
is this all post 2018, or was it constructed basically at the same, or was there anything here before the?
This building was there.
Yeah.
This is new. This was under construction. So patchwork, but Amsterdam Nord redevelopment. And what's interesting about Elsenhagen Zout is, so now they've decided to place around 2,000 new dwellings in this area, also giving some land for self-build purposes. But originally in zoning plans, this neighborhood was not supposed to fulfill any residential functions because it's quite important ecologically. So it holds a very important water storage function, and it connects this canal on the other side with a green strip. And it's also an important colony for pipistrelle bat populations, which they've disturbed in preparing this area for redevelopment. And during between 2017 and now, they had to fell around 2,500 trees for this area. And I actually lived up the road during this time, and there was a big protest, and you could see signs there on the Google Earth against the municipality, who announced that these trees would not be returning to the area. And so this kind of points out to these interesting ways that the disappearance of green is governed or translated into new forms. And the way that the tree felling worked was the monetary value of the tree had to be paid into a tree ordinance, which doesn't mean that the trees have to be replanted in the same area. So there's concerns being raised about disparities in terms of green space access in these densification locations. But there's also a really interesting discourse of improving green quality over quantity presence in the plans, and what that means, and whether you can get the same ecological and health and experiential values from these new technologies like green roofs and green facades is extremely questionable. And here in Elsenhagen-Zout, it's maybe one of the most dramatic cases of green values being disturbed, because it was deemed a Versnellingslocatie, or acceleration zone, in the Cours 2025 Housing Building Action Plan, which means they were allowed to sidestep a lot of environmental regulations and procedures to sort of fast track the process of building these houses. And so this was all sort of in like media about the green structure and stuff. This development was specifically mentioned as problematic, and it really goes to show that these policy goals are conflicting, and it's not dealt with in a way that's necessarily simple. And I walked along here yesterday, and I saw some fun graffiti up these. So these are all new developments, this strip, the Singelstock. And there's some graffiti on all the sort of developer things that just says like "for who," which I thought was interesting. But yeah, here I just wanted to highlight the ecological densification intersection. And now we're going to move on to our next stop. Here you can see what the Old North. We're at the Boventi Mall, which is sort of like the centerpiece of the neighborhood. It was built in the 1960s, and we can see remnants of this very outdated design, the above ground parking, and very bad connections to the rest of the neighborhood. And it's not a particularly green space, but it is a fairly successful public space, which really calls attention to the fact that when we talk about densification, we're talking about placing new infrastructure in existing communities and neighborhoods. This is a market on every day of the week except for Mondays, and I swear it's well visited and fairly successful. And just to talk a bit about the neighborhood demographics, this neighborhood has the highest percentage of elderly residents in all of Amsterdam, a higher percentage of non-Western residents, and it has quite high rates of unemployment, low rates of education and whatnot. So through densification plans, not only is the city densifying, but they're attempting to introduce social mix into the neighborhood. And while they're creating amenities and bringing changes that are arguably beneficial to all, like less above ground parking, there's a lot of contestation by groups who say that the new Noord is not being remade for the old residents, and who cling to Noord as having a very specific identity, as sort of this like frayed edges, these weird buildings. I mean, people are very emotionally connected to these things. Noord had faced a lot of stigma over the past decades. It was nicknamed the Siberia of Amsterdam, or what Australia was to England, I saw in one paper. So to see the extent to which that the existing population here is included in these densification efforts, and how they experience displacement, whether that's physically or more symbolically. And this sort of tension is very much symbolized by this bowling bunker, it's called, which was built in the 80s. Near the rest inside. So this is a community space. So this was once tailors, and now it's been transformed into a community space and like circular repair hub, so you can come have your clothing repaired. And when we visited before, you could see it was very full of, like, there were a lot of elderly residents, and the people clearly use this space. But the extent to which it's going to exist later on is questionable. They also didn't know what would happen to this. Yeah, so presumably it will. It's a temporary function, more or less. And so this, in combination with the market, show that there's, you know, existing structures here that are maybe coming under pressure via densification efforts. But especially the bowling bunker that we saw, it's now been entrusted to an anti-gentrification action group called Defend Nord. And they, you know, bring up all sorts of grievances about the changes happening in Nord, citing this feeling of new build panic, whereby they feel that their district is not being remade for them necessarily. However, there are other people who say that this area is in dire need of some amenities that are lacking. So there's sort of this double-edged sword occurring, and it's really down to how the municipality is able to negotiate and maintain these existing structures in this property-led and very contractually focused framework. So I think that is what remains to be seen here for the future of the neighborhood. Yeah, so that's sort of the flip side of these densification things.
You mentioned that place is going to be squatted.
It was squatted from 2011 until 2016, and then they sort of handed it over to this anti-gentrification group, and they turned it into like a broodplatz, which this is also one of those, which is like a breeding ground regulation. A lot of the old squatted places in Amsterdam were sort of legalized through this creative breeding ground system, which the squatters see as sort of like a step towards neoliberalizing the spaces, but it is like the format in which a lot of these sort of creative things in the city exist. So the bowling alley is going to be transformed into like a circular, also repair thing, but we'll see whether it...
Probably part of something bigger, because that's usually takes place. I mean, when we came here, the three of us, to discover this space, today is quiet. But the day we were here, the market was on, and this place was also full of people sitting around. It's also a Pratt cafe where you can also learn the language. There's a repair shop, there's a recycling shop. You can bring your goods here, they can do things with it. And we were briefly talking to the manager, and she was telling me, like, this is really where people come. So you can see it's the heart of a community. And of course, in new spaces, as we are going to see in a minute in the retail space, this kind of atmosphere is very difficult to be created. And I think that one of the problems with the densification plans is that to what extent whatever they are going to build is going to connect to this kind of existing community networks. That's very, very unclear to me. It's also not the intention of the real estate industry, unless you tell them that it should be the target. But yeah, so far we don't know.
I just have a question. Like for this area, the north. Oh, thank you. So for this area, the North Metro extension was like quite a big investment. Are there other public infrastructure investments going into the area? Because it feels like with densification, there's going to be a lot of demand for like water, sewage, electricity, or is it kind of up to on a per development basis?
It's a very good question. I think the biggest investment going to be the new bridge over the Eye.
Which they've allocated 120 million to that project recently.
Yes. So once it's there, it will be like, imagine Rotterdam. I mean, if you go before the Erasmus Bridge between north and south, it was a different story. Feyenoord side, no-go area. It will be exactly like that. And you could also see that, of course, the existing neighborhood dynamics were kept there, but what is put on top of that is so dominant. The ING buildings, the skyscrapers, the big theater put in there. I expect that kind of infrastructure to come with it.
Well, this is the final stop of our tour in the middle of the Boventi Mall, I guess is the pun. And this mall is sort of what makes this area so complicated to plan, more or less. Since the first master plan for the greater area was made in 2004, there have been 5 plans that failed for the area, largely because the public space and shops in this mall are owned by individual shopkeepers. So there's about 68 different owners, also the public space, which is from a legacy of this regulation that allowed for shopkeepers to buy their space after 20 years. And so there's a lot of coordination challenges in trying to densify this mall area. And so the idea is to build housing on top of the stores without disturbing them necessarily. So on the plans I saw there was a number of like 1,800 new dwellings. And in the plans they also cite very like, well, we're creating eyes on the street, we're going to fix the social safety, we're going to open up connections. So it's all very well and good, but one of the main ideas in creating a plan or creating the current plan in contrast to past failed plans is that they're shifting and creating a lot more space for flexibility and participation. So the collective of shopkeepers is supposed to be playing a much bigger role. There's a private developer called Site that is coordinating the development in tandem with municipality plans, and they have these sort of big grandiose visions and central principles for the area, but it's all very vague, of course. And so this mall area just really drives home that it's extremely fragmented. Consensus building is difficult. Obviously nothing started here in terms of building, and I'm very curious to see how they're going to top up this mall area. But also what's going to happen in this governance space that's created through flexibility and participation. Because while there's quite some meetings where residents can come, and they had all sorts of fun like pictures in their plans with who's using the area, what do we need. They talk about incorporating local wishes. For instance, they don't want to have any tourist function here. So they want to make it a space for regional retail to happen, but absolutely no tourism is expected to enter the area. However, the far bigger influence in this flexible participatory space are the investors, the developers, and the capital at the end of the day. So that's basically the last points in our densification journey. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Wonderful. Great job.